Welcome back to the Backwards History Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Will, here with my co-host, Kevin. Say hi, Kevin.
You're just going to tell me to shut up.
Shut up, Kevin.
I can't win for losing.
Well, that's double trouble, right?
Hi, Kevin.
Too late now. Too late.
Agree to disagree.
Right. Speaking of things that are late, I guess it's a good time for me and Kevin to actually give you a little bit of, insight into what we have found personal interest in individually and collectively in history. What we find to be our collective top 5 historical subjects, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it.
That'll work.
Me and Kevin were both going to come up with 3 each, and we ended up meeting in the middle on the same one as our third one. So I'm going to let Kevin start off with his first main thing that he enjoys researching in history or just enjoys in general.
Learning about.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. I get to go first. It must be opposite day.
That happens all the time. You're the fact checker. I'll let you get your stuff out of the way, and then I can go into conspiracies and all that other garbage at the end.
Yeah, which we've all come to know and love.
Maybe not love, but if you're
Definitely
listening,
know.
you're at least here.
You're here. Appreciate you.
Right.
But no, I've always been fascinated by the study of history. One area that has always been just rich with material to study, but also one that has really shaped the course of human history, is the Roman Empire. I love studying about ancient Rome, their rise to power, their desperate struggle to hold on to power, and then their refusal to let go of power once it was all over with.
You said the Romans, right? You didn't say the U.S. government?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Continue.
No, we're going to go back a little ways on that one. Now, while Roman history encompasses a lot of human history, at least recorded human history, one area that has always fascinated me is the transition period between pagan Romans and then Christianity coming in and converting the Romans over.
Or the Roman Catholics.
And those are the ones. Now, when the Romans come to power, after they win the Punic Wars and beat the Carthaginians, like they beat them bad, they start to expand. The old saying, we either expand or we die. And one thing that always comes to mind with the Romans is nobody partied like the Romans. These people took debauchery.
Which I think we mentioned that prior.
Wow. Anyway.
They took debauchery to a whole nother level.
A whole new level.
I think that's like a literal direct quote from our episode that mentioned them prior.
Yes. Anyway, when the Romans start to expand, they start to realize it's hard to subjugate people by force. So what they do, they'll start to set up basically like satellite governments in new territories. Like they're going to come in, all right, look, you guys are going to pay us taxes. So-and-so's in charge. This is the new institution we're going to use to govern things.
We're going to let you have your own representatives, but ultimately, we call the shots.
You pay us, we call the shots. And it works because people don't really want to fight.
Sounds like America spreading democracy.
We're not there yet, Will. Anyway, this system of governing and conquering spreads all throughout Europe and all the way over to the British Isles, but it never gets to Ireland. They never make it that far. So when the Catholics come in, take power, and they start to spread, well, this great institution, this great system is already in place. So they just kind of take the Roman blueprint and apply it to themselves, which explains why Christianity was able to expand so rapidly and so successfully in Europe.
Well, I mean, it didn't hurt that it was at the tip of a sword.
Well, yeah, and they kept some of the Roman ways, but
The Crusades come to mind.
Later on, yeah.
But still, yeah.
But
it's
still,
the same basic premise.
Yeah. Believe what we say or we'll hurt you. But anyway, when it comes to Rome, that's the period of history I've found to be very interesting to study, is that period where things start to change, but do they ever really change? You can call it something different, but it's the same old, same old.
Exactly. Modern governments act very much the same. Speaking of modern governments, one of the most powerful modern governments, United States of America, had to start somewhere, right?
Oh, yeah.
So my personal favorite, which admittedly, I guess you probably all know where I'm going here because I am the resident constitutionalist, is the American Revolution. That's one of my absolute favorite points in history. This ragtag bunch of people, which are not necessarily ragtag because there was a lot of military.
Oh, yeah, they were definitely...
Or former military.
Former military from the French and Indian War.
Decided, hey, we've had enough. We've had enough of these taxes. We've had enough of this dude 1,000 miles away telling us how we're going to handle things. We've had enough of someone over there saying what's best for us over here. We want to do our own thing, and we're not going to make it easy for you anymore. And admittedly, at several points in time, it seemed like they weren't going to get the job done.
No, it seemed doomed to fail a lot.
But they put in motion some very huge things, not just for this country, but for the world in general. Because the United States being able to beat the world power at the time, which was the British government, United Kingdom, the crown, was huge.
Oh, yeah.
Was huge. And the men that, I mean, they're not gods. We've pointed that out, that they were just men. But they were men that did very, very noble things on a grand scale that affected the world and the world even to today. I mean, that things that were written in 1776 literally are being fought over today.
Yep.
20,000 people stood outside of the Virginia Capitol building earlier this week.
Monday, I believe.
Or early, at the point of airing of this,
Right.
early last week. And that was stuff written in 1776.
It has not changed.
Or not in 1776, but between 1776 and 1789. And then just the American Revolution was beautiful. I mean, as an American, I guess that's very, very...
Patriotic.
Well, not patriotic. I'm thinking like, it's not geocentric, it's...
Nationalist.
Don't label me a nationalist, Kevin. That's very dangerous in today's world.
Only to the ignorant.
But yeah, that's my big thing. Of course, granted, I grew up in the Carolinas, and of course, a lot of major Revolutionary War battles happened in the Carolinas, and that was the main operating area of one of the most famous militiamen, Francis Marion. Otherwise known as the Swamp Fox, was from like the Sumter, South Carolina area, which is where my grandmother's family was from. So of course that was all told to us as kids and that kind of junk. So that's always been a big historical portion to my interest in life.
While I didn't choose that particular one myself, it is one I find very interesting. It also has great implications in my life.
I mean, that's almost a given.
Right.
For any American that's interested in history, you kind of have to go to the Revolution at some point.
Anyway, I did get my minor in American Studies. So
Well, that helps.
it helps a lot, too. But another area of American history that I found to be just really fun for study and research were the Salem witch trials. Now, there are a lot of misconceptions around the Salem witch trials, which we discussed at some point.
Yeah, we might have the podcast, whose
Might have said something.
mission is to battle misconceptions, may have mentioned that in a prior episode.
But the reason... Now, the Salem witch trials have been widely publicized in popular culture for centuries. One of my favorite movies growing up was Hocus Pocus.
You're one of those.
I'm one of those.
That movie kind of irritates me.
And that's why nobody... I mean, to the point that I have a cat, black cat named... I named him Zachary Binks without knowing it's pronounced Stackery.
Oh.
So I messed up there. But it doesn't matter what you call a cat because they will never listen.
Truth.
But anyway, the area I found most fascinating about the Salem witch trials is this is where you start to see the wheels begin to turn as far as the separation of church and state. We start to see, hey, we're all reading the same thing but not coming up with the same answer.
Because people use their interpretation of the Bible to condemn people on a governmental level.
Right. You start to see, hey, we just killed 19 people.
Yeah, not necessarily the Bible, just religion in general.
Right. Maybe it's time we reevaluate how we or what we base our laws off of. And granted, it took some time, but at that point in American history, you begin to see people realize, hey, this is dangerous because so-and-so interprets it this way, but so-and-so didn't, and now they're, it's just a whole mess.
How do you know she's a witch? Because she looks like one.
There you go. Oh, Terry Jones.
Speaking of which, Terry Jones, if you don't know who Terry Jones is, he was a member of the, I guess, group that did the Monty Python movies. And if you've ever seen Monty Python and the Holy Grail,
that's a good one.
He's the guy that was conducting the witch trial in the movie. And sadly, Terry Jones left this world this last Tuesday. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Monty Python's great stuff. If you've never seen it, watch the Monty Python.
You'll thank us later.
Yes, you will thank us later.
But yeah, Terry was actually a medieval historian. So
yeah, I had no idea.
I was really sad when I heard the news. I need to go back and rewatch some of those. It's been a while.
We need to have like a tribute session and watch all Monty Python.
The Salem witch trials. While many people see it for the entertainment part, where you get movies, plays, and things, I saw it more as a turning point of separation of church and state, and that's why I find it so fascinating. And not to mention, the whole town goes crazy, and no one quite knows where the hysteria comes from.
And they crush people with rocks, drown them, that kind of stuff. They just never lit them on fire.
Yes, they never burned them.
Don't go into detail. They have to go back and listen to our prior episode about it.
That's right. It's already been recorded. It's there for posterity.
Don't cheat, folks. But the famous writer, Arthur C. Clarke, co-writer of the screenplay for 2001 Space Odyssey, said any sufficient advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Very wise words.
Which would explain some of what was going on in the Salem witch trial, probably, in some respects.
We still had a lot of witch trials.
Or the weaponization of government and religion. But we'll go on from that. One of my main favorite things to study in history, and that this is a huge span of time for mine, is space exploration. Space. Like, I'm talking all the way from the 60s to modern day space exploration. I love space. I am a nerd. I am a geek. I love science fiction. I love the whole nine, but space and our attempts to
understand it.
Figure out what is going on outside of our own bubble, for lack of a better way to put it.
Oh yeah.
I like it. It's great. Like the Apollo missions and the shuttle missions and the probes and the satellites.
All the stuff they're doing at SpaceX.
And all of the things that we understand, and all the things that we have no idea.
Not even close.
Every answer brings 100 more questions. I love it. And then all of the advancements that we enjoy today.
Oh, yeah.
From space exploration. Velcro. If you have Velcro in your house, that's because of NASA and space. Probably the main reason for this for me is I lived in Columbia, South Carolina. And I don't know if our listeners know about the Challenger shuttle mission that was a catastrophic failure soon after launch. It exploded, killing everyone in the crew. But one of the crew members was a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
and I believe she was from the Columbia area, or at least South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a space camp. Like, it was a day camp. It was the Challenger space camp, and my parents sent me to that space camp because I couldn't go to the actual space camp. But I think that didn't start it, but it certainly didn't help.
Oh, no.
It.
It's kind of exacerbated.
Exactly, definitely. But they had the mock-up, mission control and space station and all that junk. Like that, I think that's where my love of space started.
I do remember those commercials they have about space camp.
Yep.
And just seeing all those kids there, like, oh my god, that looks amazing.
If you watched Nickelodeon as a kid in the 90s,
you
saw
lot.
space camp commercials.
I mean, just that takes me way back.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Getting a little nostalgic in here.
A little nostalgic. And I guess that kind of leads us to where me and Kevin met in the middle on our fifth point in history that took our attention.
Oh yeah.
If it wasn't for this,
oh Lord,
space exploration would never have happened for us, or it would have taken longer to happen.
Yeah.
For the world, or the United States more specifically.
Right.
If it wasn't for World War II,
oh yeah,
we would have no space program. And we talked about that in our Apollo 11 episode. So if you want details on that, please go back and give it a listen. But
go back and listen to it twice.
If it wasn't for Nazi scientists that the U.S. government recruited after World War II, there would be no space program. But that's not the only reason me and Kevin are big on World War II.
Oh yeah, World War II is truly a gargantuan moment in human history.
Quite literally a world-changing event.
And this is where you have war on an industrial scale. You have tanks, you have planes, you have huge ships, you have, towards the end, you have rockets, which, as you might have guessed, eventually lead us to the moon.
Thanks to Wernher von Braun.
Oh, yeah. But one of the things that World War II does, besides shaking up, world powers, it completely changes the world in every truly conceivable facet.
Financially, business, it changes politics, it changes literal border boundaries, right. It changes everything.
I mean, you have countries that don't exist anymore. You have new countries come up. You have the United States emerge as not only a military but an economic powerhouse, which to this day continues to shape the world we live in. But you also have a truly unprecedented loss of human life. In both world wars, that span about 31 years, you have about 100 million people gone. That also has an effect on the planet. A very tragic loss of life. But it changes borders, as Will had mentioned, because now people are displaced. Right? Well, we had a town here, but it got blown up. It's gone. So people begin to move. People begin to migrate. And so you start to truly, whereas the United States was a melting pot, now the world starts to become a melting pot. Because, especially in Europe, you have so many people having to be moved around. And my great-grandfather fought in World War II. And when he came back, he could speak German. He spent so much time over there. But it opens people's eyes to the rest of the world. So when soldiers come home, you have the baby boomers.
Yeah.
And then the economy takes off. Well, what happens? People start having kids. People start going to work. Technology starts changing. The world changes. Now you have commercial airlines. Now it's easier to travel around the world. It takes away these walls that have been put up around people.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, while you did have a massive loss of life, now people are starting to connect with people on the other side of the world. And you're starting to realize, hey, there's more to the world than just what I can see in my backyard.
Well, it wasn't uncommon for GIs to take wives in other countries and
no.
have them move back with them, or in some cases the GI would stay with their significant other in the other country. So yeah, that definitely helped to break down barriers.
Mm-hmm.
while other barriers were being built.
Yeah.
I'm looking at you, East and West Germany, but that's a subject for another episode.
Another subject. But yes, that's why I enjoy studying World War II, because it changes everything. Now, unfortunately, it costs an enormous toll, but we are living in the post-World War II world, and we can see the benefits of it.
But with those benefits, there could be some negative impacts.
Oh, there's no doubt there's negative.
Let's look back to my first point that brought us here. Operation Paperclip. The adaptation of Nazi scientists and other Nazis into the American culture or service to the American government. Kind of makes you wonder, if we brought Nazis in and put them in such high status because they were so useful, so vital, did it stop there? Did it stop with their usefulness with the space program, or where else did it go? What influence did they have on what we now see as the United States? Kind of makes you think about Captain America Winter Soldier, because Dr. Arnim Zola, the Hydra scientist, was recruited by the U.S. military to try and continue the work of Hydra because it was useful.
It was useful.
So the work of the Nazis that was useful to us was the V2 rocket, or the V rockets in general.
Rockets, yeah.
And that's what ended up being the Saturn V rockets eventually, or the same, like that led to the Saturn V rockets.
Right. Because they had a huge jump on us as far as rocket technology and research.
What else did they influence, I wonder?
It's interesting and somewhat frightening question to
And
ask.
that's not, I don't know if that's a rabbit hole we can go down, but we'll see.
Well,
That would be a fun one.
Oh, yeah.
But as always, we're just two guys with a microphone. We don't want you to take our word for anything. We don't want you to think we're experts at all. We always want you to do your own research, form your own opinions, and trust but verify.